Yo, what up guys, it's Flark, and welcome to the video that I'd like to call the Introductory Guide to DK PvP. Essentially a combination of all my most asked questions from my stream, from my YouTube comments, from the DK Discord, and the DK forums. Essentially an entry point or jumping off point into rated PvP from a more beginner area. I noticed there was a lot of mechanics or lingo or dynamics of the class that I kind of take for granted when I'm explaining them in my coaching videos or even my guides, that I think I could do a lot better job of explaining here to give a reference point for everybody who asks. It is true that going from a straight beginner's mindset where you are coming in from random battlegrounds or PvE or just really fresh to the game, and then jumping into a video where it's very fast paced and we're going through things that maybe I'm taking for granted or that people don't just inherently know, that would be kind of difficult. So this video hopefully will provide like a bridge from some of my more intensive content from the very most rudimentary level. So this is going to go over all the stuff that you guys have been asking about. We've got add-ons and interface choices and comps and strats and win conditions and other lingo that resonates well with me and is going to be really valuable toward kind of getting a better feel for DK and PvP, especially rated PvP in general. The other thing is this video should be a little bit more timeless than my specific 8.3 guides for Frost and Unholy, in that it's going to be less tuned. The 8.3 guides are more tuned toward, BFA's mechanics, essences, Azurite traits, corruptions, things that are really, really important this season. But the information found in this video will probably contain a lot of stuff that DKs have been doing in PvP for a long time. So that should help kind of be very useful to catch up to what people have learned over many expansions and translate it into future success in Shadowlands and beyond. And if I have to make more of these types of videos as the mechanics change in Shadowlands, that's totally fine, because this will, once again, have some aspects of BFA as I try and explain through it, because that's the expansion we're currently playing. So that is my introductory spiel, and we're going to jump right into it. So once again, I'll have timestamps below, like I do in my big guides, so you can sort out the information or revisit information in sections, because there will be a lot of talking, and hopefully that helps make the information more digestible, despite the video being on the longer side. But let's get right into this without any more waiting, and we're going to start right with add-ons and interface choices. That is a good jumping off point, I believe, for this video, because it is something I can answer more directly. Some of the other mechanics in this guide will be very situational. We'll have to require a lot of explaining the different situations where certain things change, but this is something I can really give you set in stone advice about what add-ons that I recommend and what they do. So let's get right into that. So the add-ons that I recommend are pretty easily categorized. I have a damage meter, I have enemy frames, I have cooldown management, I have my bar set up, and that kind of covers it, right? That's the whole screen real estate that we got going on here, all 4 sections. So let's take a look at some of these things. Let's bring up Gladius for the first bit. So Gladius is my enemy frames, Omnibar is my CD management, Bartender is my bar setup, and Details is my damage meter. So let's talk about those one by one. Let's start with Details, because this is a really, really powerful and underrated tool. Even though it's very widely used, I still don't think people kind of get a feel for all the things they can do with it. Damage meters are great. They allow you to see, is my damage as good as it should be? And they can allow you to place blame on your healer if you're losing games, which we didn't. Great healer this time around. But they also do a lot of very subtle things, especially in the art of theory crafting. So you'll notice that when you bring up a meter like this, you can kind of see a lot of individual dynamics that matter. For example, how much of your percentage of your damage is coming from a certain source. So if I was trying to get a value, when I theory crafted my the value of mastery early, and I was like, how good is this in PvP? I don't care how good it is in PvE, but I do care how good it is in PvP. I would look at every game that I played, especially at higher MMR, and I would see, okay, so shadow, plague, which is shadow component, physical, fire, shadow, but doesn't count because items don't count. It's only spell abilities from a DK class, not Blood of the Enemy. But that one does. That's Magus, shadow, physical, right? And I would frost, more physical. That one was shadow, right? So I would kind of calculate all those things up, and I would add the percentages together, and I would say, okay, well, how much of my damage is actually shadow damage? Then, of course, you would have to add the fact that these 30 hits had healing absorption as well, which you could get at the end screen from the Blizzard game, how much Necrotic Absorb healed for. And you can see, like, at the bottom, okay, well, how much damage was that padding because they attacked pets? And you can kind of get a feel for all those things and get a value in your head for how good Mastery is. As it turns out right now, the answer is not very good. But it's very possible with Mastery increasing pet damage in Shadowlands that the answer will be a lot better. So you can use it for theory crafting decisions. You can use it to see if your necrotic strikes are up to par. I did 30 in this game and only 9 festers. That's really good because it means I'm not overcapping myself on wounds. Your festering wounds from to spam necrotic strike in the first place, and I'm utilizing all my wounds effectively with necrotic strike. This dynamic is really important, as I've discussed in my Unholy Guide video. This is a more generalized DK PvP, so I'll be talking about mechanics for both Frost and Unholy. But in this one, there is a dynamic for DK, which is wound management, for Unholy DK, which is wound management and necrotic strike spamming. And it will help me because if I press these abilities that apply wounds by themselves, right, and then I started auto-attacking the dummy, I don't really have to press Festering Strike at all, right? Like here, I'm just pressing one over and over. I'm not doing any other aspect of my rotation, right? And there's APOC, and then I'm going to press Necrotic Strike a lot. See, I haven't pressed Festering Strike one time. This button has never been used. So it's been a totally huge waste, right? Because why would I press it if I don't have to? So you can kind of get a feel for if Festering Strike is really high and Necrotic Strike is really low, then you can kind of get a feel for, okay, well, I've kind of played that game wrong. And there's a lot of other subtle things you can tell with details, and I think that's very valuable to use this add-on as properly as you can. You can also check to make sure you're not getting juked. The training dummy apparently juked me a few times there. And you can also check, all sorts of things. Very valuable tools. You can see if we're purging off the right buffs, and if your healer's doing that, if you're managing their dispel properly and getting your maledict, you guys can discuss what's going on during the game. You just have a lot of information. You can even check really, really neat things, like the uptime of certain buffs by going to your damage done and then hopping over to auras here, right? Now you can see the uptime of certain buffs. There's a proc buff from your cloak. Here's a proc buff from my awesome haste proc corruptions. Here's my Fester Might, which is my Azurite traits usage. So it starts getting more and more impactful the more you know to do with it. Seeing the uptime on buffs in PvP is very valuable because PvE is so much different, and the things that they theory craft for PvE might only matter with infinite uptime. So now you can get a feel yourself for how certain mechanics are affecting you in a PvP environment where things change, where you're getting CC'd, where you're getting kited, where your enemy is not letting you beat on him all game long for free. And that's the power of details. I know people don't expect to talk that long about a damage meter, but it's a Flark video, so prepare for the ride. So the next add-on, let's keep going in order here across my screen. Let's talk about Gladius. Gladius is a must-have, I think, or at least some form of enemy frame management. whatever you want to use is fine, but if you're looking to this video for my personal recommendations, Gladius is the one that I would choose. It's very intuitive, big, easily customizable, and it has a really good default setup. So let's take a look at that default setup. I'm going to hide it momentarily and bring it right back up. And there's Gladius. So what do we have here? Well, we have DR trackers on the left. That is a really, really powerful tool of Gladius. Diminishing returns in PvP is a mechanic where, obviously, if you get affected by a crowd control effect, the next one is half, and then the duration, and then the one after that is quartered. That means, essentially, crowd control can't be spammed on you until the end of time. That would be really bad for gameplay, and mages would be even more powerful than they already are, and I don't think we need that. But in this case, those spammable CCs still have a limit because they can't just have the same duration each time. We all kind of know that by now, but if you didn't, there's a little refresher. So what happens then on Gladius is when one of those effects is used, and they use polymorph as an example, it shows that they're on polymorph DR, or polymorph diminishing return, for that amount of time. So right now it's half, so the poly DR is halved. And it's going to be up in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then right when this disappears and these icons go away, now you can freely use that form of crowd control. So that means if you stun them with Asphyxiate, then a purple little hand, gripping hand, would show up right there. And it'd be like, okay, well now they're on stun DR for that amount of time. And again, it would count down. So if there's no icon here, you know you're free to do whatever CC effect you like. If there is an icon here, then you're might be careful about resetting that diminishing return when it's at a low countdown number. Let's say we got 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Well, why would you stun right now when you could wait 1 more second unless you're guaranteed going to get a kill in that brief amount of time? And those are the kind of situational decisions we'll be talking about later. But as you can see, that is a very useful tool toward helping you manage a mechanic in the game that affects everybody. Now, we don't have a lot of off CC. We have no polymorphs unless we Dark Simulacrum it, the PvP talent. I have a video on that. Or if we talent into blind as a frost DK called Blinding Sleet. But really, we don't have a lot of DRs to work with. But the ones we do have are very important. DKs, as we'll discuss again later, kill and stuns. That's a lot of melees do that. It's very valuable to have an enemy stunned or an entire team stunned if you're playing 3v3 arenas. So managing that stun DR is very important. Okay, so what else does this do? Let's keep going, right? So on the right side of it, it shows the enemy's trinket, including which trinket they're using. If they're using Relentless or Adaptation, which is easily exploitable in PvP, it will show what they're using and how long it has remaining. And it's kind of doing that right now. This guy has 45 seconds left on his trinket. He would be a free kill right now. So that's just pretty valuable if you're looking to see, okay, how long do I have to set up this win condition before he has his trinket back available and he'll be able to do something about it. And of course you'll see that on the side of the screen. So they do it in a pretty easy to manage way. It'll just show the countdown, and if they have it up, then there'll be no countdown, just like with the DRs. Now finally, you have important defensive CDs that come over their nameplates. You can see, hey, this is a DK rogue and a warrior, but if they have an important defensive CD on them, it'll show that instead. So in this case, the hunter is using Aspect of the Turtle, and the mage is using Ice Block. And that's pretty valuable. I mean, you'll definitely be able to see if there's a big blue block around a mage, but lower graphic settings can be hard to distinguish the difference between bubble and not bubble, or maybe dark and not dark, depending on how terrible your computer is. But you know, there's a whole bunch of defensives that you'll now be able to see. AMS, I think even Devs Advance or IBF can be shown on Gladius, and it can just help you see, hey, I shouldn't use that effect. Hey, I shouldn't stun into Icebound Fortitude. It makes them immune to stuns. Hey, I shouldn't grip into Devs Advance. It makes them immune to grip. So using this little icon here as one more way of giving you instant, immediate information that can help you make decisions in the game. It's just another tool that Gladius has. And of course, all of this is customizable. These are just the default tools, and that's why I like Gladius so much, because the default setup gives you a lot of really good introductory information. You don't really need to spend hours and hours saying, oh my god, what am I supposed to do with this thing? But once you get more familiar with the abilities that are showing up, you can go into, I don't need to go into how to customize add-ons. Every add-on has its own menu that you can bring up from some command and customize it accordingly. Also, there's a few little bits of information, subtle. Whether or not they're casting will be right down below their screen, and of course their resources and their health bar. So you can see, oh wait, I gotta stop a drink, he's low mana. Or you can see if enemies you're not targeting are casting for a nice pet kick, or switching over and kicking them with Mind Freeze. So that is a lot of information for one add-on. Then on the other side of your screen, you've got the rest of the information you would need, because Omnibar, the add-on called Omnibar, of course all these can be downloaded from Twitch client. What this does is it allows you to customize very specific abilities to show up right here, much like that DR did when they were on DR. This ability will show up when it is used, and it'll start a timer until when it can be used again. When that timer goes off, the ability will disappear. So let's say Rogue uses Vendetta. Vendetta is really important. It does a lot of damage. It showcases that a Rogue's going to be bursting right now. So if a Rogue's going to be bursting right now, you'd kind of want to know about that so you can either peel him or use the defensive accordingly. So when he presses it, it'll show up right here, and once any icon appears here, okay, it's active. And then it'll start counting down that timer. When it's on cooldown, you'll be like, okay, that's how long until Vendetta's up. Then it'll disappear, and you'll be like, okay, Vendetta's up. And that's how people kind of tend to say, hey, he's got Vendetta in 30. You can set this up with all the important CDs that you yourself can manage. Vendetta, Combustion from a mage, Arcane Power from a mage, Icy Veins from a mage, Warlock has Dark Soul, Infernal, Incarn from a Boomkin, Incarnation. And all of these things will show. This is probably worth looking at. In the spells section, okay, so I just typed in /omnibar into my chat window here, very simple. And then you'll just go to spells, and whoop, I have access to every single thing in the game. So it is no secret what this can do. You need to see when a DK has stun back up, check Asphyxiate. If you're not really doing well against Demon Hunters and you want to track his defensives or his offensives a little better, feel free. That doesn't exist, so you're fine, thank God. Of course, I'm tracking Counterspell on this setup because I was playing HPAL mostly, which is fun. So I'm trying to get juke kicks, but if I wanted to, right, I would just put Combustion back up. And here, look, I can go through setting it up right now. You get there's kicks that I had set up for my HPAL, but instead, here's Dark Soul. That was an important one, right? That's what makes Warlocks do so much damage with their Chaos Bolts during Infernal windows. Oh, and how about the boy himself? I'm sure we can find them. The Summon Infernal. So if you click these things and set it up, then when those abilities are cast, they'll show up in real big. You can customize the size. It'll show up real big right here. You can be like, oh, that's Infernal. I'm going to use, wait for it, Anti-Magic Zone. And now you have an answer for their important CDs. So that is how you trade out your defensives for theirs. You can tell, hey, wait, he's got Combust in 4 seconds, guys, and I don't have Zone. We have to line of sight. Because you'll know that, because you'll see Combustion 4, 3, 2, 1, and you'll be like, wait a minute, Zone is 1 minute and 40 seconds left. Oh my god, I didn't match those up. We have to do something different. So you'll start getting information that you can use to make situational decisions, which is the most important thing of PvP during the game. So that is awesome. You'll get a feel for it. Start putting really important CDs down there and look and start managing all of these the screen real estate. You got your enemy frames on the right, your cooldowns on your left, and yourself on the middle if you feel like setting it up that way. We'll talk about interface in just a second when I get to Bartender. And get a feel for, okay, those are the cooldowns of the enemy, here's what I have to do to adjust, wait, I don't have that available, communicate to that to my team. And it synergizes really well with both the information you have available to you and then what you can tell your teammates about what's going on. And communication is huge. We'll talk about that later too. There's a lot to talk about. But let's wrap up add-ons right here and interface at the same time by talking about bartender. So what I'm going to say about interface is actually very little. I get asked questions about this. The biggest one I get, and I'm going to get this one out of the way right now, is how do I see the resources? What add-on do I use to see like resources and stuff above my frame and enemy frame? It is actually just an interface option, where you go to like names, and you do show special resources on target and personal resource display. It's right here. So interface, names, this. I'm going to get that one out of the way now because it's asked a lot and I didn't even remember that I did it, but people like it, so now you can have it too. But interface itself is super personalized. You'll notice if you go to all the best players, you just start looking at phenomenal players like Drainer, Sea-Doo, or Mez, or there's too many to list, Peekaboo. Everybody has a slightly different UI. There's no, hey, this is what UI you use to become better at the game. That is a more personal outlook. You'll notice that even at the very top end, they're still all using something slightly or even more than slightly different. So trying to give information on that is that's like set in stone is foolish. Instead, what I recommend is that you create an interface that centralizes as much of the information around the center of the screen, so you're not looking up there or over here or down there for anything. That kind of moves the enemy frames in a little bit from the right side, the omnibar in a little bit from the left side. Maybe I see a lot of people use their information, like their personal health and maybe their target's health, like what I do, right in the middle of the screen, and then of course your bars nearby that. But just essentially bringing everything in, and a good tool to do that, in addition to all these add-ons and their positions, is just bartender. So the only thing that I'll recommend for interface is just if you're really struggling and you have no idea where to start, just grab bartender. Again, I don't think me telling you how to set up your bars will change anything because it's really personal on how you digest and see information. But if you're having troubles, bartender is super easy. Just everything's customizable. When I click bartender right up there, shows everything in green. They're all movable. Bar 4, bar 5 shows you the names of the bars, so you can change their properties and their dynamics that way. So now we know bar 4 is there. You can take a look at bar 4. It's one row of 12 buttons. I can change the size of it, and I can move it around, and I can change how much space is between it. So I can really just customize things the way I want. But again, it's pointless to go very detailed into that because everybody can use their own setup that helps them process the information as best they can. And there's add-ons. Those are the add-ons I use and why I use them, and the ones that I would personally recommend. So now let's get into some more situationally technical stuff. Let's talk about the comps that DK can play, what a win condition even is, and how we're going to achieve them, because those are questions that I get a lot. So let's talk about the history of DK and DK now and what makes that so important. So Death Knight has traditionally had a lot of pressure, a lot of single target pressure and AoE pressure, just oozes damage. In PvP, you tend to see the damage meter, just the overall damage meter of DK, always high, no matter what expansions it's been. And they've never done like middling DPS, but only done burst setups. They're not rogue, they're not mage, they're not any of those classes. They're constant, spammable, oozing damage. They have pad pressure from their diseases. They have upfront damage from their rotation. They have bursts from all of their plentiful, impactful cooldowns from Pillar of Frost or Unholy Frenzy or any variation of these cooldowns that they've had over the years. But the one thing remains, they do a lot of damage. Certain classes also do a lot of damage, but confined to very short, bursty windows. Certain classes don't do a lot of damage overall, but they have a lot of control. But DK just always does damage. So it's very complementary with classes that also provide a lot of pressure, or at least provide a constant form of pressure in another way. That other way tends to be Mortal Strike if it's not just sustained damage. They don't do very well with setup specs. So how can we prove this? Well, DK Mage isn't a very good comp. It's never been. I'm sure people can play it, but when was the last time that we saw DK Mage storming the ladder? I'm not really sure we ever have, but if it was a thing, then I did not play during that time. Again, you can play whatever the heck you want, man, but the overarching power of a comp will be represented in the amount of play it gets over an expansion's worth of time. And DK Mage is not one of those comps. So you can see, if you play with something that traditionally relies on setup, control, and sharp, sudden burst windows, you're not going to make a very good comp. But what comps are traditionally good? Well, DK Windwalker, DK Warrior, DK Demon Hunter, even DK Shadow Priest, or in the past, DK Warlock. These classes, when they have complemented DK's sustained pressure, have done really well with them. The three that I mentioned first always have, since the iteration of that class was brought into the game. Demon Hunters are fairly new, and DHDK has never really been bad. Windwalkers are new in the context of the entire game's history, and also that comp has really never been bad. This is because it complements the playstyle, like I was saying. So Windwalker DK brings Immortal Strike. That means, in and of itself, sustained pressure. If the enemy healer is always forced to deal with reduced healing, then that increases the value of the pressure generated from the DK's damage. So any class with Immortal Strike has some merit being in a DK's comp, and you'll notice these two guys that we didn't talk about, Hunter and Rogue, also have had a brief stint with very valuable comps. DK Smoke Bomb, which is DK Rogue, was viable in WoD, and maybe some in Legion as well. PHDK, Pally Hunter Death Knight, or any form of it with a different healer, also saw a lot of viability, certainly earlier in the game's history, because Hunters have access to Immortal Strike as well. In fact, no classes with Immortal Strike haven't seen some use with DKs because they don't personally bring one, so it increases, again, the value of all that damage that you're doing by a lot. But what about the classes that don't bring Immortal Strike? Why are they good with Death Knight? Well, Demon Hunter perfectly synergizes with DK's toolkit, regardless of having that Immortal Strike or not. Demon Hunter has an enormous amount of sustained damage and sustained cleave damage, as well as having self-sustain and defensive cooldowns that it can rotate with the Death Knight. So if I drop down a zone on a combustion, then I may have just saved me or the Demon Hunter. I can use it on either of us. Then, if the other one gets targeted by Vendetta later, we still have Darkness available, which is called cooldown rotation. If we can save ourselves from overlapping, so use them at the same time, and spread out our cooldowns, then it helps you, like if I use my zone now, and then it's not until 40 seconds later that he needs to Darkness another important cooldown, then by the time they're ready to set up again, we've actually rotated. So now there's a potential for more personal CDs to be available, and then zone might be back up, and then Darkness might be back up, and then personals, and it's like a rotation of these CDs that matters. So any comp that has CDs that you can rotate are very valuable. DK Shadow Priest actually has seen a lot of play at high MMR from a certain few players, and it's because those CDs are very rotatable. S-Priest was going to have to be the target, right? You would rather go Shadow Priest, who's casting mind controls, VTs, locking down your team, controlling your team, than go DK. But S-Priest has really, really good CDs to rotate by itself. Fade and Disperse, you compare that with Zone and the DK Peels. Of course, you have Grip and Asphyxiate to get them off of your Shadow Priest. And if you keep rotating through those Peels and Defensives, Fade being on a very short cooldown, then you're always going to have some tool to survive while providing once again, sustained pressure. DH has a lot of sustained pressure. I think you guys all know that by now. Cleave and single target. Shadow Priest can also just pump out a lot of damage over a long fight. Warlock used to be able to do the same in the very early history with Aflock. DK Aflock, Shadow Cleave would rot down teams with sustained pressure. And DK Destro used to just constantly throw out disruption. AoE stuns from Frost DK and Legion into Infernal stuns, into coils, into fears. You just have all of these forms of AoE disruption and damage from both classes. So that's a history on what makes a comp good. But what's really good right now? Well, DK Windwalker still. Windwalker DK, DH DK are kind of at the top of the pack for those, especially in the BFA playstyle. Windwalker DK has the most powerful form of DK synergy, which is it has that Mortal Strike for the sustained pressure. It also has sustained pressure on its own, and it has a third component, which is utilizing Death Grip. So it's no secret that DKs do a lot of cleave damage. If I drop down my opening rotation, I'm doing damage to everything around me. As I throw out all these things, that was Blood of the Enemy, a wheel, bursting sores, cleaving everything. You'll see what all these other things around me are taking damage too. It's not just the guy I'm hitting, there are yellow numbers everywhere. So it is valuable to have all three people on top of you. That is not where the other team wants to be at all. They want to be in Mexico, very far away, and not in the blender that you've created. Those yellow numbers are everywhere around you. So if you can force a situation where all players are on top of you, then you want to do that because you're going to pressure them immensely, and they're not going to be able to heal just one person. They're going to have to heal everybody, which is just objectively harder, and everybody knows that. It's harder to heal you and a teammate if you're both dying, if you're trying to heal yourself and the teammate dies right next to you. So how do you do that? You grip them with Death Grip, and then you stun them all together. So if you Death Grip, if this guy is our little healer in this simulation, and you Death Grip him over to this pile of people, and then the Monk leg sweeps an AoE stun, or the DH Chaos Novas an AoE stun, or back in Legion you do your Remorseless Winter stun from Frost DK into an Infernal stun from your Warlock. These are tools to keep everybody on top of each other, which means all those yellow numbers that were cleaving everybody around you is just going to apply more pressure. By the way, your teammate has cleave too. Blade Dance with Trail of Ruin, as well as Rolling Dragon Punch and Fist of Fury from Windwalker. So that just amplified your damage by an immense amount and forced the other enemy team into a bad situation by giving them more things to heal through. But at the same time, you've also got another thing going for you. Their entire team is stunned. If you leg sweep 2 targets, then you stun 2 people, and the healer is still free to do whatever and might be able to heal through it. But if the healer is gripped in and stunned as well, then not only are they taking all the additional damage, they're also having to deal with it 4 seconds after it's already done. If you stun them all, 5 seconds even, if it's leg sweep. Which means now they're recovering from a bad situation. They're not even able to start healing through that as soon as they'd want to. They're all going to be low health, and they have to separate and start trying to heal, and it puts them in a very bad position. Which kind of leads from the effectiveness of comps into a little talk about win conditions. We've said those words so many times. They come in 2s, they come in 3s. But since we're on the topic of 3s, let's start there. If you Death Grip a healer into a big pile of enemies and start doing a shitload of damage, you know what he's going to want to do for that stun is he's going to want to trinket. He's got to get out of it. But he doesn't have that trinket now for 2 minutes, which means if you set it up again, if you communicate with your partner, hey, when do you have leg sweep available? Hey, when do you have Chaos Nova available? Oh, it's up in 10. Okay, I'm going to save my Death Grip. Okay, I'm gripping in 2. 1. Gripped him. Then all of a sudden, you've set up another go while he doesn't have trinket up, which means he has to sit it now. So if you're using this tool that I gave you before, Gladius, and saying, okay, when does that guy have trinket back? Not for another 30 seconds? Well, that's really good. Let me death grip him in here and we'll kill him. Then what's going to happen is you're going to recognize who doesn't have trinkets. You're going to grip the healer and you're going to sweep all of them, and you're going to go who doesn't have the trinket. And that's going to do an enormous amount of cleave damage. They're all going to be dying, and there's nothing they can really do because the ability, the trinket, the honorable medallion, or gladiator's medallion, that allows them to answer this is not available. So now they just have to sit there and take damage, and as long as you're doing your rotation properly from other videos that I've had on this channel, you'll do enough damage that you'll probably score a kill. And that's the standard win condition of 3s for those types of comps. You want to get the cooldowns out of the enemy and then continue to do your aggressive goes by gripping people in and sweeping them, or by stunning 2 people together and cleaving them, and your sustained pressure from your damage and mortal strike and their damage to get a kill. That's how Windwalker DK is played, how DHDK is played, while using that cooldown, defensive cooldown rotation to outlast your opponent that I talked about before. Even DK Luck in Legion was very, very similar to that. TSG could even be similar, where he would stun one, you would grip the healer to the one that you stunned, and then you would stun that individually, because right now Warrior doesn't have an AoE stun. They don't have access to Shockwave, but you can still grip and asphyxiate on your own, and then they're still on top of each other, which allows you to blade storm them together, cleave them together, sweeping strikes, mortal strike them together. It's no secret that melee does a lot of cleave, so you're trying to set up situations where you can cleave them. DKS Priest is the only anomaly, where it's essentially just plays to the fact that DK is tanky and Shadow Priest is tanky. They both ooze a lot of damage, and stun into silence can end up being a really good kill pressure window. And it's pretty cool to the people who are playing that high on the ladder. So that's a little talk about win conditions in 3s. The question I actually get more, though, is win conditions in 2s. What does that even mean? How do you kill blank? How are you able to kill this when I'm struggling against it? So let's talk about some of those examples right now. So DK does a lot of fucking damage, and in 2s you start with dampening, which means you effectively have a Mortal Strike effect. So DK with the Mortal Strike effect is really scary, and your burst windows then become extremely hard to heal through. So all you really have to do is make sure during your burst windows you can hit them. If you can do that, then them healing through it is going to be their problem. It's going to be a nightmare. Which means 2 things are your win conditions in 2s. 1, killing in stuns, because they can't get away from you. And 2, preventing crowd control effects. Those are 2 things that DKs do extremely well. Kill in stuns, prevent crowd control. Because either A, they're going to want to run away from you, which stops you from getting pressure during your kill window. Or they're going to want to crowd control you, which stops you from getting pressure during your kill window. So let's say you want to manage both of those things. Well, here's how I would do it. First, coordinate with your healer. If you're playing, let's say you're playing with an HPAL, which is what I generally tend to play with. It's a very powerful comp, can play super aggressive, and they have a very long stun. So, in the beginning, you have a set of setup globals you're going to do no matter what spec you're playing, Frost or Unholy. Remember, this is a DK PvP guide, not an Unholy PvP guide. I'll say both. With Unholy, you have Raise Abomination, Unholy Frenzy, just pressed it. I'll click them so you can see Dark Transform, good old Blood of the Enemy if you're trying to add to your burst, your on-use Trinket, and Apocalypse. Those were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 setup globals. Once you've got all of them going, the damage just does itself at that point. All I'm doing is spamming Necrotic Strike. I mean, look at all the damage that just comes out of your CDs. And the big fat A-bomb and your Unholy Frenzy is applying the wound. So Festering Strike becomes a non-issue like I talked about earlier in your rotation. So all you're doing, click it, pressing this button, Necrotic Strike. Which means if you can get those setup globals down and then the enemy is stunned, then all of a sudden you have those 6 sources of damage and Necrotic Strike spam and the stun. And now you are achieving a win condition. The enemy is stunned, your damage is coming, it's inevitable, and you are spamming an ability that provides pressure. You're not doing something that does no damage, like pressing a cooldown or trying to set up or using crap like Death Coil. You are spamming Necrotic Strike, which is applying an enormous amount of single target pressure from the damage that it does and the healing absorption that it provides. So you're setting up with your setup globals, then you are stunning, and then there's a third thing: CC prevention. You have oh, and I said I was going to go over this real quick. The setup globals on Frost are Empower Rune Weapon, Pillar of Frost, Remorseless. Exact same thing. Frost isn't as good in 2s, but of course we'll go over it because I know people would ask. Very similar, right? Empower Rune Weapon, Pillar of Frost, Remorseless Winter. Those are the things that start building up damage, but they don't do damage individually on their own initially, so you have to set them up. Very important. Okay, so now both DKs, once again, have access to CC prevention tools. Anti-Magic Shell, Icebound Fortitude. Icebound Fortitude is reactive. When you're put in a stun, you can use Icebound Fortitude to get out of it. But AMS is proactive. If you're in a polymorph, you can't AMS and break it, which means if you believe that you have a kill because you've got all your setup globals and your HPAL ran in and got a stun on them and you are ready to do damage, then this tool should be used preventatively to keep you out of incoming CC. If you're playing against a Lock or a Mage or a DK that can press Chains of Ice, or a Demon Hunter that can imprison you, or I don't know, any class in the game essentially. The only classes that don't really have any form of magical debuff are like Warrior. And even with all the Essence shit, they're probably bound to have something. But essentially all of these specs, and by the way, there's still a healer that has CC, like an instant root from an Ardruid, or a Hodge from an HPAL, or a root from a Restoration Shaman. There are so many forms of immediate CC that you won't be able to get out of with AMS after they're already on you, that once you have your setup globals popped and your HPALs Hodge them, it's a good thing to what I call pre-AMS. And I have dozens of clips of this on my channel, which is, again, this is why this video is even being made, to get a better feel for what those other videos even mean. But what I'll do then is I will pre-anti-magic shell, and I will stop them from having any chance of peeling me, which just accomplished the other part of my win condition I set up before. So I wanted them to be in a stun while my damage is coming, so they can't get away from me. And I wanted to be out of CC, so I can continue pressing abilities that do damage. So that is the two tools that I would use. And put it all together, and you create about 95% of the clips that I have on my Twitch or on my YouTube. And actually, alongside of this week, I'm having a arena highlight video, which I will link in the description below again, that will show you, like, hey, this is what it looks like. I did 2 carries for free on my stream. I do that all the time. And essentially, that's how those games tend to go. On the dummies here, which is not as good as PvP, but again, I'm going to have dozens of clips like that coming out either with this video or slightly after it or slightly before it. It's setup globals. We talked about them, so let's see them in action. And then the pre-AMS, right when I start doing my damage, and then watch this. I'm just tap, I'll click it at this point. I'll press this button over and over and over and over, and at one point you'd throw 1 Death Coil in when you're runed out, but then you get right back to having runes, so you press Death Coil again. You can pretty much click your rotation at that point. And that's a lot of fucking damage, right? On the dummies, it's a lot more because you're cleaving all 3 of them. But the damage done is not important. It's just the rotation and what it looks like. But in that rotation came AMS, and in it would come the stun from your partner. Now, if you don't have an HPAL, other things can stun too. You can do an Ardruid who rakes stuns into Bash. You can do a Mistweaver, and Grip Sweep is again an option because they are a monk. You can even use your own, but it just requires you to get all those setup globals down, and then right after you've done them, versus 6. It's not as valuable because it's good to have that free global so you can use it on a setup global and then your healer can come into stun. And HPL DK, I think, is one of the best comps that are available in 2s right now. Very, very aggressive. But that is a win condition. So how does that apply to specific comps? How does that answer your questions that you've always been giving me? Well, one of them is, how do I kill archers? They just get away from me. They just kite me. They just run around the pillars in circles. They root me and they slow me, and the healer slows me, or the healer roots me and the DPS slows me, and I just can't kill him. I can't kill him. Because you're just running after him, you know? You're just chasing him. You're just playing right into what he wants. But if you do those setup globals, and you're kind of messing around in the middle of the map on your way over to him, you're doing those setup globals, and then he gets stunned, well, he has to trinket, right? Because he can't do all those things. If he gets stunned and then you AMS all the CC from his partner with that pre-AMS that I was talking about, then which of those things is he doing? Well, you're certainly not getting CC'd because you AMS'd. You have trinket for any stuns or icebound fortitude for any stuns, so that's not happening either. And he's not kiting you because he's in a stun. So none of those things could happen. So he has to either trinket or he takes all of your damage, and he's not kiting you, and he's not doing all those things that you said he was doing that disrupt you. Which means now he doesn't have trinket. So in a minute and 20 seconds, when all of that stuff comes back up again, he still doesn't have trinket. So what is the win condition? It's like a class for DK PvP. What becomes a win condition? And this is true with Frost as well. Pillar is a much shorter cooldown than trinket. So is your stun. It's a much shorter cooldown than trinket. What is the win condition? You get his trinket, you see it on Gladius, you say, hey, my CDs are back up. Do you have a stun? Or do I have a stun? And then you do it all over again. And the second time you do it, he doesn't have that answer. But you can save your anti-magic shell and all of your CDs until they line up again and do the exact same opening rotation that you did before. But now he doesn't have that answer that he needed to use to live. So instead of just running after him around in circles and just praying that eventually, hey, can you stop moving so I can kill you? I would appreciate that, man. That would be great. Can you just please? Instead of doing that, you set up your CDs effectively, kill them in stuns while anti-magic shell is available, because that is your win conditions. The enemy can't run, you can't be CC'd, and all your damage is coming with the dampening effect that makes it impossible to heal through. And that's what win conditions mean. It happens with Frost, it happens with Unholy. Right now Unholy happens to be better at 2s, which is why I'm on my Unholy DK, because more people are going to be playing it. But let's say Frost comes back in Shadowlands, do the exact same thing. Pillar of Frost, rotating with your setup globals, get the stun out, do as much damage up front as you can. If he trinkets, then you've got him in the next stun, and if he doesn't trinket, then that's gonna hurt, and that's how you kill archers. But subsequently, that's also how you kill anything, because that is how the DK win condition works. You have an enormous amount of upfront burst damage that's nearly impossible to heal through. Your only weakness is your mobility, and you're off CC. You don't have polymorph that you can spam. You don't have blind, like the rogue blind, you know, the real good one. You don't have sap. You don't have traps. So instead, you're looking to kill somebody in a stun. And preferably in 2s, if you can make it happen with good connections, that should be the healer. And that's your win condition. So we're getting a lot more familiar now with what these terms mean and how to achieve them. Because you can do that to monks, kill them in a stun. You can do that to priest. Well, actually, you probably just kill priest way before that stun even comes. You do so much damage. Again, my clips are going to be coming out alongside this video. If I just do this setup on a priest, then by the time I'm finished pressing all these buttons, he's like 30% health. And guess what? He has to paints up and barrier and all that shit. But Necrotic Strike goes through that because it's healing absorption and not damage, so Pain Sup doesn't reduce the healing absorption, neither does Barrier, and you pretty much kill him. I mean, if he sits there and lets you get your opener, even against really good priests, you could just kill him in the opener. It's pretty fucking wild. And that's your win conditions. So there's a section on how to play with you and with your teammates and play to the strengths of Death Knight. Now let's talk about the enemy team and what they're doing, because that is the final bit of introductory PvP information that I think people need to know about. We talked about it a little bit when we were going over Omnibar. So let's dive right back into that in a big way. The enemy team is also trying to win the game. They want to win too. I know it's a shocker, but it's not just you as the protagonist of your own world. You're playing against other people, and they want to win as well, which means they're going to be pursuing their own set of win conditions and ways to achieve them that maybe they have their own YouTube guide for. And each comp has a different way of achieving that. We know now what Windwalker DK needs to do. So if you're on the opposing side of a Windwalker DK, you need to play defensively in response to what they're doing. And you'll know what that is now. So if they grip your healer in and they leg sweep all three of you, then you need to use something to get yourself out of that situation. You have this stun immunity right here, which you can rotate with your trinket. If you see the grip come in, you can immediately pre-AMS if you don't have a trinket. And then when you get all stunned, the magic portion of that cleave, which DK has a lot of, they're a spell-heavy class, will be reduced by anti-magic shell. Or you can just move away, which also really helps. So that's one way to disrupt the win condition that we were just talking about. But there's some way more impactful ones that we should talk about, namely Mage Lock, Rogue Mage, and pretty much every form of casters, right? They're scary. So Rogue Mage, what does Rogue Mage do? Well, they kidney somebody, they polymorph somebody else, they Ring of Frost the Third, and they all 3v1 that one guy who was kidneyed. So one person CC'd from a polymorph, the other person CC'd from a ring or maybe a blind, the third person is CC'd from a stun, which means nobody on your team can act, and all three of them start doing damage to that one guy in a stun. So they turn a 3v3 situation into a 3v1 situation, and 3v1s are really easy to win. So that's what they want to do, right? We've seen it before. I'm CC'd. Oh shit, I'm CC'd. Well, I'm in a kidney. I'm dead. Oh, fuck. That's what happens, right? Which means you need to start using your tools to disrupt that situation. You have a lot of them. Both DKs do. Grip can stop casts. Polymorph and Ring are both casts. Kick can stop casts. Polymorph and Ring, still both casts. AMS can prevent them from occurring. If you're about to get Ring of Frost and you have no way to stop it, sometimes you have to throw this defensive cooldown in order to prevent the CC, so you're not part of that triple CC. Then if the rogue kidneys your partner, now you can stun him with Asphyxiate because you're not in a ring. Look, you're immune to it right there. I see it. Right? So using your disruption tools, of which you have a lot of on both DK specs, all DKs have grip, all DKs have AMS, and all DKs have kick, you can stop them from doing those setups. You just have to be aware of them. That's where Gladius comes in handy, because you'll always be able to see who's casting. You'll be able to see if he gets a polymorph and then starts immediately casting it. Right down here, Ring of Frost. And you're like, oh my god, if that goes off, all three of us are going to be CC'd. My partner's going to die. I have to make sure it's stopped. Death Grip him, kick him, or Anti-Magic Shell. You can also short pet stun it if you're unholy, pet kick it. If you're frost, you can blind it with blinding sleet, or both specs could asphyxiate. You have so many tools. Sometimes you just have to throw them off to stop a team from doing what it wants to do. And you know when it wants to do those things because of this add-on I talked about earlier, Omnibar. When those cooldowns are coming up, when Rogue has Vendetta up soon, or Mage has Combustion up soon, then they want to do those things to get kills. They kill in their burst windows that are shown by these cooldowns that you now are tracking. So that shows you, hey, okay, they're going to do a triple setup. I need to throw out one of these very important things. And I need to stop it. The other tool that you can use then is one of your own important defensives, especially if it's on you, but even if it's on your teammate. So let's take a look at our bad boy anti-magic zone. You see combustion appear. That is all spell damage all the time. It is a fire mage's enormous burst tool. You know what it does. It gives him so much crit. It makes his mastery do more damage based on his crit, which means he is getting proc after proc after proc instantly, and it's doing more damage when he does, which means that's a good time to do this if the training dummies are your partner. So that means the second you see that cooldown being used, you're going to want to drop down a purple bubble on the person that they press that kidney shot on, because that entire now go was just reduced by 60%, and you have thwarted that kill window. Even if he didn't Vendetta, then you can use all those other disruption tools to stop that Vendetta go. Okay, well, he still has Vendetta up. He's trying to ring me. I'm going to anti-magic shell it, then I'm going to stun the rogue on his kidney. Right? So what you're doing to make plays against the enemy team, and again, I'm going to have so many clips of this coming out within the next couple of weeks, especially in threes, of which I need more clips on this channel, is you are stopping the enemy's win conditions, just like we established your own win conditions, with all of the things that I just laid out for you. You can use defensives when they have their CDs back up from Omnibar. If he's about to kidney you and Vendetta you can get out of it with Icebound Fortitude. You'll see the Vendetta popped right here. If he's about to kidney your teammate and combustion on him, you can use Big Purple Bubble, put it right down on your teammate right when you see those things popped. He's not going to run out of it because he's in a kidney shot, so you're going to be fine. And if they're setting up triple CC on you and your healer, you have a lot of tools. Kick, 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 grip. Lots of tools to stop those casts from going through. This is where coordination and communication with your teammate comes in handy. That was just one comp. It's pretty crazy how much there is to know about this game, even from a beginner standpoint, trying to get a feel for all this crap that I'm talking about in my guides. That's why this is going to be very long. But we're coming to it. We're coming to a close now, because when you talk about the other comps, it's the exact same mindset and ideas, but just with different abilities to manage. If you're playing against Mage Lock, then they're going to do Dark Soul and Infernal, that I already told you to put on your Omnibar. That gets you a purple bubble. God damn, it does so much damage when a Chaos Bolt comes down. And then, well, wait, what if they spaced it out? What if they used that Dark Soul and Infernal and you just used your big purple bubble on it? And now they have Combustion coming up. Well, you know that they use it, or that they have it available, or that it's coming up soon, which means you can play proactively. You can save your anti-magic shell and all of your stops, all of your kicks, your death grips, your freeze, your asphyxiate, and you can stun the mage on his combustion. Or if you have literally nothing, you'll know that because you're looking at your screen and you know oh my god, it's up in 10 seconds. What am I going to do? You'd have to line. You would have to line until your cooldowns come back up. You would have to run your way back to a pillar and a line of sight, because that makes it much more difficult for the mage to do any damage. If you are throwing chains of ice on him, he is very slow. And if you're running around the pillar while he's very slow, he won't have a good window to kill you in combustion. And that is how you decide these situational choices against all of these different comps. Mage Boomy, when that was good, you zone the combustion, then Incarn comes out, we have to line. Slow them and run around the pillar. Rogue Mage, if Vendetta comes up, you have nothing. Run behind the pillar, try and line the mage on the kidney Vendetta, try and heal through it, stun the rogue, go rogue, stop him from playing aggressive by putting pressure on him. Unfortunately, there's so many different situations that occur in a game that explaining them all in this video, even after taking however god long this video's been, we haven't even scratched the surface. But this gives you the tools and what you're looking out for to now go into other videos, gameplay videos, streamers, my stream, Mez's stream, other people who play other classes and have to react to other comps accordingly. YouTube videos, YouTube guides, highlight reels, anything that showcases this information. So you have the tools now to be like, oh, that's what they're doing, and this is why. Nobody will ever be able to make a video that explains every single answer to every single comp in 20 minutes or less. But, which I know this video has gone way past. But with this knowledge available, hopefully you would be able to start looking for things that people are doing in all these other mediums of gameplay that you can watch and look at and be like, oh, okay, this is why he lined there. Oh, this is why he threw out AMZ there. Oh, this is why he was communicating with his partner, what defensives he had. Or if you could kick the next one. Or what do you have? Can you stop the next poly? Oh, I can grip it. Okay, there you go. There's so many different situations that occur in PvP, which is what really makes it so fun. It's different every time you play. I know people say it's pretty dang scripted, but I think that's a little bit more pessimism and negativity than anything, because we still got a lot of choices on our hands, guys. And while some of the defensive trades are pretty scripted, situations will occur in crazy ways that you haven't seen before, and you'll have to react accordingly. And the best players in the world know they can do it every time, so they're just being modest. Let's say it that. But there we go. So we went over add-ons, win conditions, the enemy win conditions, and how to adjust all those things, as well as some lingo that I've been throwing out for a long time that I kind of take for granted. If this was helpful, let me know. It was certainly long, so it has that going for it. And I will try and make follow-up videos to this in the future. But I wanted this video on my channel for a long time, and I hope it helps. Thank you guys very much. And just over an hour. Have a good rest of your day.